Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time. Today, we're digging into why we so often treat fascism as a fixed ideology from the past, and how one historian's work completely challenges that assumption.
When you hear that word, fascism, what pops into your head? For most of us, right, it's probably a collection of historical images, specific uniforms, symbols, maybe a few famous leaders. We tend to think of it as a kind of checklist of ideas from a long time ago.
But is that really what it is? A fixed ideology? A consistent program that you can just read and study? Well, in his landmark book, The Anatomy of Fascism, historian Robert O. Paxton argues that this entire approach is, it's misleading. He suggests we need to stop looking at the words and start looking at the actions.
So what about this fascism checklist we all kind of carry around in our heads? It usually comes from the manifestos and programs that fascist leaders themselves put out there. But, if you actually look at the historical record, a very, very different picture starts to emerge.
Just take Hitler's own words. Sure, he had a 25-point program, but once he was in power, he openly laughed at the idea of actually being bound by it. And that right there reveals the whole game. For these leaders, the program was just a tool to get support. It was completely disposable once it served its purpose.
Okay, so if it's not some coherent belief system, then what exactly is it? And this is the absolute core of Paxton's argument.
Paxton basically asks us to flip our focus completely. Instead of analyzing what fascists say, we need to analyze what they do. He defines fascism not by its philosophy, which is always changing, but as a pattern of behavior, a pretty predictable process for taking and exercising power.
Now, this definition is so important. Notice it's not about economics or specific policies. It's about a political dynamic that's fueled by this feeling of crisis, this sense of humiliation, and the promise of a national rebirth. And that promise is pursued with a kind of messianic energy that can justify almost any action. Here's a helpful way to think about it. Imagine a fascist movement as a kind of shape-shifting organism. It's constantly adapting to its environment. It'll shed old supporters and recruit new ones. It changes its supposed beliefs to fit whatever is going to help it grow and get a foothold in the political landscape.
So what does this path, this whole process of gaining power, actually look like on the ground? Well, Paxton breaks it down into some really clear, observable stages.
Paxton lays out this really clear progression. First, these movements form, usually as a backlash against both liberal individualism and socialism. Then, and this is key, they start to gain legitimacy by teaming up with traditional conservatives. And crucially, they often take power not through some violent revolution, but by being invited right into the government. And once they're in, instead of calming down, they radicalize.
This second stage, the alliance with elites, is just absolutely critical. Paxton shows that conservatives, people like Franz von Papen, who helped make Hitler chancellor, they often make this fatal miscalculation. They think they can use the fascists' popular energy to crush the left, and then easily control or just get rid of them. They think they can ride the tiger.
But the outcome is almost always the same. Far from being tamed by power, these movements become way more extreme. Once the old checks and balances are gone, their core engine, this drive for national purification, for scapegoating, for expansion, it just kicks into overdrive.
So why does all this matter? Why is reframing fascism from an ideology to a process so important, especially for us today?
It forces us to ask a much more practical question, doesn't it? If we stop looking for perfect historical copies, what are the real warning signs of authoritarian danger?
See, Paxton's framework gives us a practical toolkit. It tells us we need to watch the actions. How does a movement ally itself with mainstream conservatives? How does it talk about and justify political violence? How does it treat democratic laws? And how does it channel popular anger against a common enemy? These behaviors, these are the real warning signs.
At the end of the day, this isn't just a history lesson. It's a lens for the present. Understanding fascism as a process of actions, not some static checklist from the past, gives us a much clearer way to see and maybe, just maybe, avoid the political dynamics that threaten democratic societies today. This explainer was based on the groundbreaking work of Robert O. Paxton.
We highly, highly encourage you to read his definitive book or grab it from your local library to get the full, detailed picture.
For the full long-form deep dive into this book and its ideas, follow the link in the description. If you enjoy systems-level analysis like this, please subscribe and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.